Anchored in Christ. Pastor Curt Hoover, Doug Hanna. We're in our ninth episode, something like that. We've lost track. And for the first time ever, Pastor Curt, we have a guest. This is terribly exciting.
No, that's great.
We have Pastor, and I'm going to say it wrong right off the bat, Hans or Hans?
It's Hans.
Hans, thank you.
You said it wrong both ways.
Oh.
So it's Hans with a staccato S, not Hans with a Z.
So not like
a ghost, like a ghost haunts a house. That's how you say it.
Okay, very good, very good. So it's not like pump you up. It's Hans. Okay, very good.
Right, yeah, Hans,
Pastor Hans Fiene from the same.
That's right. You got that one
Fiene,
wrong.
I would have gotten that one right.
Wow.
Fiene.
Okay.
Yes. My parents gave me two names that everyone mispronounces. So Hans
folks,
Fiene.
We're going to let the pastor now introduce himself. Sir, what is your name?
My name is Hans Fiene.
Ah, okay. And this part I know I've got. The Lutheran Satire guy. That's you, right?
Yes, you said both Lutheran and satire correctly.
Thank you.
It's a very good rebound.
We're off to a strong start here.
Now, are you the inventor of Lutheran Satire?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the creator of it. It is actually its own nonprofit, which I turned it into a number of years ago. So I basically could get grant money for computers and software and things of that nature.
Smart.
And I learned after I filed articles of incorporation that you can, according to your bylaws, you can give yourself any title that you want. So, which is really annoying because right now I'm the president of Lutheran Satire, but I could have given myself the title like the Grand Taco Supreme.
There's still time.
Yeah,
we could have a meeting and change.
Quick meeting, board meeting, or get an attorney involved and get it done in no time flat.
Yeah, follow Robert's Rules of Order to change my title.
So, why did you think we needed Lutheran Satire? What was the point?
I didn't really think anyone needed it at first. It was more so when I first started it. So I grew up and I used to write skits and stuff like that. But in the dark ages of 2008 and 9, I didn't have anything to do with them because you had to have like a theater troupe or like money for a studio or something. So I would write stuff and didn't really have anything to do with it. And then a friend of mine noted to me that there was this software that you could use at the time. It was called Extra Normal, which started with an XTRA, Extra Normal. And it was text to talk, I think they called the software. So basically you would write the dialogue and then they would have these robotic voices that would speak it. And so that enabled me to start taking some of my ideas and turning them into things. And when I first started, it was basically I was just doing very inside Lutheran baseball stuff, just to sort of make fun of my friends and Lutheran culture. And then a few videos in, I kind of started to notice there were a couple that I did that got a much bigger response than I would have thought. Back then, it was one of my earlier videos hit around 5,000 views, and I thought, oh, well, that's a lot more than just sort of my crowd of LCMS Lutherans that are watching this. And so, I don't know, maybe 5-6 videos in, I started to realize, oh, I think I actually have the opportunity to teach people what it is that Lutherans believe with this in a way that's sort of quick and efficient and biting and hopefully funny. And in such a way that I would never say that anyone could be catechized off of my videos. It's not like you can watch them all and know everything that you would need to know in order to become a Lutheran, but certainly enough for people to go, oh, wait a minute, there's something a bit, either Lutherans are not what I thought they were, or I had never thought about them before and didn't even know that they really existed. And then all of a sudden, now there seems to be something to this, and I'm hearing, perhaps a stronger gospel proclamation than I was hearing elsewhere, and that might filter them to a Lutheran church somewhere, to an LCMS congregation somewhere, which has happened a bit. I've had a number of people throughout the years contact me and tell me that, which is always a wonderful thing to hear, that it's kind of functioning the way that you want it to. So yeah, in the end, it was, when I started it, it wasn't like I'm gonna do a thing that's going to make a difference or anything of that nature. It wasn't like I felt like I was filling a void that needed to be filled. It was more so just sort of by accident, as I kept doing it, that I realized I could kind of do more with it than I had been. and that could that it could sort of fill the need of like just throwing this out there for people, that there is a confession of faith that maybe you haven't heard of before, that might piece things together for you in a way that where you always kind of felt like maybe something was missing, and that was the hope, anyways.
You always been Lutheran?
Yes. So I grew up in a Lutheran family. My dad's an LCMS pastor, retired now, which means he's preaching every weekend in retirement. My mom's also from an LCMS family. Her dad was the president of the Fort Wayne Seminary for a number of years. And then you go back on both sides of the family. It's kind of pastors basically back until the days of the Reformation. I made a comment on Twitter the other day, which I think is probably true, that there probably aren't more than 10 people on the planet that have more pastors in their family tree than I do.
Nice. You're up there. Yeah. My sense is, I haven't been a Lutheran my whole life, and my sense is y'all don't know what you have. And yet when you create Lutheran Satire, you must have had some sense of, wait a minute, America isn't quite getting it. They need to know. Was that at all a part of your equation here?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you are an LCMS Lutheran, and I grew up in areas that were not abundantly Lutheran. So I grew up I was born in Minnesota, which is abundantly Lutheran, but we left, but not really. I was born in Duluth, Minnesota, but we left when I was only 9 months old. And so my earliest memories are from the 7 years we lived in Sandy, Utah, which is just outside of Salt Lake City.
That's not Lutheran.
So, right. So it's less Mormon now than it was when I was growing up. But when I was growing up, that area was about 85% Mormon. Virtually everybody that I knew was Mormon. Other than the people at my church, almost every single person that I knew was Mormon. We had some Jehovah's Witnesses who lived across the street, which didn't really solve the feeling like a fish out of water problem.
No.
You pray for God to give you some non-Mormon neighbors, and he gives you Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're like, should have been more specific with that prayer request.
Darn.
Then we lived in Norwalk, Connecticut for 5 years, which is culture. I mean, sort of culturally Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Jewish, but just the kind of predominant religion is nothing. And then we moved to Indianapolis area when I was just shy of 13. And that Indiana is certainly more Christian than either Utah or Connecticut, but it was not a predominantly Lutheran area. I mean, my dad planted a church there. There were at any given time maybe a couple of kids from my high school, maybe 2 kids from my high school that went to our church. That number obviously got a lot higher throughout the years as the congregation grew. I didn't grow up in a super LCMS world. And so I was always pretty keenly aware of the fact that no one had any real idea what Lutherans were, especially when I was in high school and I'd talk with my friends, and they didn't really have the first clue as to what we believed about anything, had some kind of idea that we were sort of not exactly Catholic, but insufficiently non-Catholic, insufficiently un-Catholic,
right?
I suppose would be the idea. And then the congregations I've served, I'm in St. Louis now, which has a huge, obviously, presence of LCMS Lutherans. But this is really the first place I've ever lived where it's a common thing to run into folks of my confession of faith.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're all pretty. Anyone who's kind of real vested in the LCMS confession of faith, we're all quite well aware of the fact that the world either doesn't know about us, or what it does know is probably not accurate.
Yeah, and it's nice to run it because my first few experience with Lutherans, we're going back 5 years now, so the memory's still fresh. Not a really, I don't want to say a humorless bunch, but not a barrel of laughs. And then I come across Lutheran Satire, and I'm like, oh well, this is nice. This is cool. So I think for me, and maybe you can relate to this, Pastor, either of my pastors here, that American Christianity is offering something. For me, it was a mix of moralism. It was a mix of emotionalism, kind of maybe Pentecostalism light, celebrity status and that kind of thing, and shallow teaching. And I was starting to feel like there wasn't much hope for me. I wasn't going to leave the church. I'm a career Christian media person. This is not going to happen. I'll be in the church,
Right.
but I wasn't really feeling connected to it. And then along comes this framework that I have. So with Lutheran satire, do you think that's part of what it does? Is it helps people understand that there's a framework to this faith and this theology that's helpful? I think that's one of the things I got out of it anyway.
Yeah, I hope so at least. I mean, every video is a little bit different in whatever topic I'm covering, but if there's sort of an overarching theme, I would certainly hope that what people would take away from it is Lutherans seem to believe there's a lot more Jesus doing stuff as sort of the center of the faith than we do. So, yeah, so if I'm doing a video on baptism, what I want people to take away from it is Lutherans believe that baptism is God's work for you, that it's not about what you're doing for God, that the Lord's Supper is not about you partaking in some sort of merely symbolic meal in order to show God how obedient you are, or to remember your faith, but through the act of that remembrance, actually receiving the feast of salvation, things of that nature. So obviously, I'm always kind of trying to do things in a humorous fashion. So I've never really seen my goal as preaching the gospel in the same way that I do on Sunday morning, but trying to show people, these Lutherans. I'm wanting people to see, like, oh, these Lutherans, they kind of talk about Jesus a lot more than everybody else. Like, I mean, one thing I've done a few times in videos is just talking about Lutheran hymnody, which is one of the things I love to do, because I just trust that anyone who wants to investigate it will find that I'm completely right, that our hymns are better than everyone else's.
It's an objective fact.
Without rival.
Yeah.
And the only reason people don't know that, and they don't know Lutheran hymns, is just kind of the sort of cultural heritage thing of, a lot of our hymns were in German, weren't translated until relatively recently. They oftentimes tend to be a little bit more challenging to sing. I don't think that really has that much to do with musically being more difficult as much as it is just people haven't heard the melodies.
Yeah,
before.
that's all. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. I'll tell you something else, not to interrupt you here, but I will.
Yeah.
I ran into a tweet today from, I do not remember the person, but it's a Reformed guy who was saying, hey, I hate to break it to y'all, but we Reformed people have been singing the wrong version of Luther's A Mighty Fortress.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Did you see that one? And he said the version that the Lutherans sing is the pure one. The one that the rest of the world sings was shaped by Unitarian theology. I don't know the history of that.
It was translated by a Unitarian.
Yeah.
Now I'd have to look into that claim a little bit more, because if that's a translation by Catherine Winkworth, the problem is she translated like 90% of Lutheran hymns.
Oops.
So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure where that translation came from. I'd have to look into the history of that a little bit more.
But it speaks to your point that we've got, the OG hymns, the good ones.
Yeah, no, we have by far the best hymns, the most gospel-centered hymns, the most beautiful meditations upon the mercy and love of Jesus. And so that's kind of a thing that I like. That's a simple way that I like to use Lutheran satire is, all right, I'm not going to make a 5-hour video that no one's going to watch analyzing hymn structure. But what I will do is I'll do a little bit of it. I'll give you a stanza or two, and I will just boldly make the assertion that what we sing is better than what you sing, and trust that, all right, well, if people want to look into it, I know that they'll see that we're right. And I think there's something too about the fact that I think for a lot of people, because a lot of church life is you just assume people, unless you're really kind of keyed in on stuff, you just assume that the way things are at your church is the same everywhere else. So a lot of times for people coming to a Lutheran church, if they can get past the awkwardness and confusion of just not knowing how our hymnal works, if you can just power through 3 weeks of just sitting next to someone and asking them to help you along with it, right? And just to get a few weeks to get used to the melodies and look at the structure of the service, you're never going to want to go back. I mean, you might want to go back if you just have an emotional attachment to, whatever it is that you grew up with, and you don't really think about things. But if you agree with the idea that the purpose of a worship service is to give you the story of, at least the purpose of a liturgy is to depict for you in musical form and in sort of worship order form the story of salvation, and that the purpose of it is to uh, give you confidence in Christ's love for you. There's nothing better than what we do. I mean, maybe you could invent something better, but I haven't seen anyone do it yet. It's like saying, that would kind of be like someone saying, I can make a better movie than Casablanca. It's like, well, I mean, it's,
sure,
I suppose in theory possible.
You could try it, but why? It's already here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's already here, and people have been kind of trying that for a long time and not succeeding at it. So that's what I kind of, often hope comes from things, is just like, I'll just boldly assert it, and I'll do it with a wink and a smile so that that this isn't just sort of unbridled arrogance, but that I'm just kind of trying to be efficient with my time and with what it is that I'm asserting.
Yeah, it gets the point across that way. Well, my own pastor, who's sitting right here, as you know, said something today that I thought was run this one by you, Pastor Fiene, and see what you think. He said that when you arrive at the divine service, it's supposed to feel a little different. It's supposed to feel, what was the word you didn't say odd or strange. What did you say?
No, it's a place that's not, it's in the earth, but it's not of the earth.
Yeah.
It's a place of heaven and earth meeting.
It's not like
it feel different.
It's not supposed to feel like you're going to the movies.
We had visitors from outside of our tradition, so needed to explain some of that. We were doing divine service setting 3. It's as liturgically different as we get, and so had to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a sense in which, like, I've told people before, if you when I have friends who are don't have a real strong connection to one denomination or another, and they move to town and they're looking for a church to join, and the thing I've said to them is, you should just go through instruction and ask them what they actually believe about stuff, and have them tell you what they believe and therefore why they worship the way that they do, because that's why everyone worships the way that they do. Baptists worship the way that they do, Catholics, Lutherans, everyone worships the way that they do because of what they believe. And trying to figure out what church to join based on a worship service is like trying to figure out what language to learn by going to those countries. Like, you can't, you can learn Spanish in Spain if it's an immersive thing, but if it's just like a 1-week visit, that's not going to tell you anything about the language. And so the worship service is a bit of a foreign language, and that's fine. That's not a problem to be fixed, because the worship service is not outreach. The worship service is the saints receiving the gifts of God.
Thank you.
And we're always happy to have people witness that and to take part in that. Even if they're a bit confused as to the order of things. But yeah, this idea that the church is not like, how sometimes you go into a restaurant and you can't tell if it's a seat yourself or like or an order at the thing,
like a cafe, or do I go sit down and they come and wait on? I don't know.
Yeah. And they're only, by the way, if I can do an old man rant, they're only making that worse now with how you go up to the counter to order and then they say, do you want to leave a tip?
Yeah.
And you're like, hold on a second. Hold on a second here, buddy. We had a system for a long time that worked, which is if I sit down at a table and a person comes to my table, I tip. And if I walk up to someone and they take my order at the desk, I don't tip. So stop messing with the system that we all understood and loved.
This is Lutheran Satire videos coming out of that. I just know it.
I don't have a theological analogy to make with that.
But you get a free one after all these videos. You can do one that's just a rant about that.
That is true. It is my channel.
You're at that point. Yeah, you've earned enough credits to do that. So,
but yeah, so I mean, so I don't like that when I go into a place and I can't tell if it's a sit down and order or go to the desk and order type of thing. But for church, you haven't been in there before, and this is the most unfathomably glorious thing in the world. The greatest gifts that a man could possibly receive are being given there. It's different than the world, which means it can be a little bit confusing. And I mean, for me in the long run, like I want everyone to come to my church. I want everyone to be Lutheran. I want everyone to share my confession of faith. But if someone comes to church and says, I'm never going to come back because I didn't instantly know everything that was going on in a space that I'm entirely unfamiliar with and had no exposure to, and I'm therefore never going to come back, you're like, well, then what are you looking for in the first place?
Yeah. No, that's a very fair point. This is perhaps an odd question, but I feel compelled to ask it. If you were not a Lutheran, what would be your backup denomination? Do you even think about that?
No, I mean, I don't. So the problem is if this is the problem I always have with this hypothetical. If the confession of faith didn't exist in a church body that was currently in existence, but if that's still what the scriptures teach, then I would just start the Lutheran Church. I don't know what I would call it.
Yeah.
But or work that way towards whatever church body I might be in.
Yeah.
I mean, I think typically what people mean with that question is, what do you think is the closest thing to you, or the thing where you could believe what you currently believe without sort of getting thrown out, right? And I think probably the best answer to that question is a conservative Anglican, because you can be an Anglican and believe in baptismal regeneration, and you can be an Anglican and believe in and essentially hold to a Lutheran view of the sacrament. That may not make you a good Anglican, but you can still sort of make that work. You have the problem of understanding the church and the church offices and the necessity of bishops, which is a little bit of a problem.
Sure.
But yeah, if that's ultimately the question, and also if the question is like, where would I feel most comfortable going to church? Like if I got put into the witness protection program and they stuck me somewhere where I couldn't have an LCMS church, and they said, all right, well, at least we'll give you a place where you won't feel like you want to throw up in your own mouth when you go to church. I imagine that a conservative Anglican type church would probably be about as good as you could get.
Yeah, and Doug answers this question really nicely. Lutheranism is just Christianity. That's the great answer. How could you think of another denomination? It's just Christianity.
I mean, that's, for me, it's how it all came home. There was nothing, or very little, that I was introduced to for the very first time under your leadership, in being part of the LCMS, but it was like, oh, it all makes sense now. That's what it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that question is a little bit like if someone were to say, if you hadn't met your wife, who would you have married? And you're like, does my wife still exst in that scenario? If she exists, I'll just go meet my wife.
That's right.
That's right.
I'll just be 2 weeks behind from where things were now.
After all these years, if you could go back and give early in ministry Pastor Fiene one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that is a marvelous question. So one piece of preaching advice I would give to younger me that I figured out, this isn't like a really brilliant thing. It's just a thing I've noticed and would probably be helpful to other pastors, is not to use too many pop culture analogies, like movie analogies, for example. I'm a huge movie buff, and so I would make movie analogies when I was a young preacher a lot. And it's not that the points weren't good. I'm sure plenty of those were good points. But what I've especially learned in the last 10 years or so is the culture has just radically changed with how people digest media. So there's no universally understood references anymore. Outside of, there are maybe 3 movies you can reference that everyone knows. And maybe, I don't even know, that might even be too generous at this point. So the problem is, if you make a movie analogy, you have to then explain the analogy. And then you end up having to explain 2 things. You go, okay, here's what was going on in this movie analogy I made. Here's the plot of this movie and the thing that just happened. And here's how it's like what's happening in the text.
And at that point, it's drained. Yeah.
Right. And then you go, and here's the point about this.
Yeah.
And eventually I just learned, just say what's in the text, and then make the point about it. Because even if there's a useful analogy to make it, there's no guarantee that more than 50% of people are going to get it.
What a novel concept. Just say the text. That's an amazing concept. Yeah.
Say what the text means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you had, we imagine and hope and pray that this podcast will reach some Christians who are pretty well ensconced in evangelicalism in America, but don't know much about Lutheranism. If you had a parting shot, a message to those folks, those other Christians, to give Lutheranism a try, what might you say?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are lots of ways to answer that. I think in the evangelical and reformed world, this is sort of a common problem between both of them. They both have this issue of um, trying to sort of root their hope in the issue um, of of certainty, right? How do I know that I'm a Christian? And the evangelicals and the reformed kind of somehow a lot of times end up in the same place from different routes, right? So the evangelicals are trying to figure out if they are among the elect. Well, so they know that, so they go, all right, I know that the elect can't lose their salvation, and so therefore, if I can know that I'm among the elect, I can have absolute certainty. And so, how do I have absolute certainty? It's by knowing I'm elect. And you go, all right, well, how do I know that I'm elect? And they go, by sort of looking at your life and seeing if you are doing better than you were, a year ago, whatever the measurements are that your desire is to grow in holiness. And if you weren't among the elect, you wouldn't desire these things. But the problem with that is that this sort of progression doesn't you don't get an answer in the scriptures for how you know you've reached it, right? So it's not three strikes and three strikes and you're out type of thing. It's all right. Well, how much better do you have to be, and how much better do you have to be than a year ago? And what sins are you measuring? Because the reality is, when you get older, you struggle with certain sins less, struggle with other sins more. How can you be certain about that? And then in the evangelical world, what you often get is, how can I be certain that my faith is genuine? Right? Because I made my decision for Jesus and I chose to invite him into my heart. But how do I know that I really did it and I wasn't just saying it for the sake of, because I wanted it to be true? You become like a bunch of 14-year-old girls talking about how many times that they've been in love, and it's, I thought I was in love with this guy, but really I think I just wanted to be in love. And so how do you find an answer to that? And there's no answer in looking to yourself. There's no answer in trying to look. If you can't compare. If you want to be certain that you're saved, the Bible's very clear that you shouldn't do it by comparing yourself to other people, right? The whole thing about the Pharisee and the publican, that's kind of sort of exactly the point. Well, if the other person is you a year ago, isn't that sort of that's sort of the same problem? So the reality is, if you want to know, if you want to have certainty is the wrong thing to be looking for. Because in a sense, you go, well, you can't have certainty in the sense that you might fall away tomorrow. I know the Reformed don't believe that we can sort of table that discussion for another time. But also, even if you're among the Reformed, like, you could be one of those people who lives a sanctified looking life for 70 years. And then at the last second, God withdraws the faith that you thought you had to glorify himself. And you never really had it to begin with. So you can't even be certain. There's absolutely no certainty that you're among the elect. And there's no certainty in looking to yourself that your faith is genuine. But what is certain is Christ and his forgiveness, and where he feeds you with it, and where he showers you in it and clothes you in it. And so what I love about being a Lutheran is that our focus is not on giving people a way to measure how they can be certain by looking at themselves that they're better than they were 6 minutes ago, but that our worship is centered on giving you the gifts of Christ that actually deliver salvation to you. There's a video I will make about this at some point, but it's like if you're invited to a party and someone says, all right, all of those who belong here are come and get a piece of cake, eat your cake, right? And so eat the celebration cake. And a bunch of them are sitting around going, oh gosh, how do I know if I'm really supposed to eat this cake? How do I know that I'm really invited here? How do I know that I really belong? You got some others going, what if I stop eating the cake? Does that mean I never really actually should have been eating the cake in the first place? And I thought I was eating the cake, but I really didn't. All this stuff. The Lutheran answer is eat the cake, eat it.
I like
You
it.
want you want the confidence of knowing that you belong in the presence of Jesus. Eat Jesus, receive his gifts. And that's where you find your confidence, because your confidence is not placed into the corrupt, self-dealing heart of someone who's always going to have a sinful nature in this life, but your confidence is placed on the unshakable foundation of Jesus Christ and the salvation that he freely gives.
Amen.
So eat the cake.
All we can say to that is amen. Pastor Hans Fiene, did I say it right?
You did. That was wonderful.
Nice. I like ending on a high note. LutheranSatire.org. What is the name of your parish?
Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Crestwood, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis.
All right. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop on by and be sure to follow him on Twitter. It's his full name. Would you please spell it for us, sir?
H-A-N. So it's at Hansfiene.
Twitter is where it's happening, man, or X, I guess is what it's called now.
I will never call it that.
Yeah, I won't either. But that's your strike zone. You're really good on X, on that Twitter platform. You guys should all go follow him and go read what he has to say. So that's cool. Wow, what a cool thing that you'd be our first guest. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.